Hey kids, on today's show we're going to reinvent the wheel a little bit and we're going to build an event calendar. Yep, here we go. Okay, so I wanted to give a little bit of an explanation here because what we're going to do is really more about the technique of what is being built necessarily than what I'm building. So I've been a professional SharePoint developer since 2006. I started coding at the tail end of SharePoint 2003 and then really hit hard in the '07 era. And as I'm sure many of us have in SharePoint, especially as developers, we have our own collection of wonderful technical debt. And I mean, I have it too. And this project today came out of one of those as I am working to update my 2013 coded projects. I have to evaluate where they need to go. Am I going to continue them on as custom code, or are we going to move them out to a Power Platform, put them in a Power App? And one ask was an event calendar. And yes, we could do that in SharePoint, but they had specific needs, especially because the form that they wanted needed to be customized. And of course, InfoPath can't customize a calendar form. So once you start customizing things, especially when they start getting very specific needs, of course, as developers, I say I've never met a wheel wasn't worth replacing or reinventing. So I did, and so now I have to upgrade these things. So the project was built around the idea that they need to have events for a given week stacked. And the calendar kind of worked, but kind of didn't. So I built them one, and now I have to replace it. And that's where this came, because I was like, can I even do this in Power Apps? And so what we're about to see isn't revolutionary in any way, but I thought it was really cool in how this was done using Power Apps. Now, I can't show you the original code. I can't even show you what I did, for the final production version, because Work owns those, and I can't screen share Work. But I want to show you what I did because I thought it was interesting. So I hope you enjoy this. Let's go check it out. All right. So this is it. Before we get into the how, I want to show you the what. And this is what we're going to build today. This is our finished version. And as you can see, it's a calendar grid, right? And we have dates that span multiple days, or events that span multiple days. And it shows them as a stacked grid. Now again, we do have calendars, we can show this, but the idea for the actual project is, one, these events will be stacked under multiple categories, and clicking them will bring up a custom form that gives details about the event. Let's say nothing revolutionary, but just the way it's put together that was fun to do. Like I say, I was doing this to see if I could, and then it got fun, and I was like, I need to share this. But to see what we have, of course, it's a calendar. We have a span, in this case 7 days. We can do a week forward or a week backward, standard scrolling, or we can choose what day we want to center on or start with, and then we see we've done that here. So you can see my data is a couple days old. But that's what we're going to build today, and I want to show you, using Power Apps, how we can start replacing some of our coded solutions. Now, of course, not all of them can be made into Power Apps, but that's kind of the challenge for me when I'm getting into this technology versus a coded solution is, well, can I? And if I can, what do I have to do to make this happen? And that's what we're going to look at today. Okay? So we're going to start blank, of course. And I guess the first thing I want to show you, unlike most of the things I've been putting together, this one is really not data driven in terms of some weird nuance. If we look at the data and we go to multi-day events, the list is nothing special. I've told you before I don't like using the title column. So the meat of this one goes in 3 columns here. Event title, which is just a single line of text, and then 2 date columns representing the start and the end dates. The reason I went simple is, the actual event has, when I did this for work, it's like 20 some metadata columns, and yours will vary. But all that matters for what we're building are these three. What am I showing and when does it need to show? And so that's really what we're doing here. If you really care in how I name these things, you could see it in previous videos, but none of that is relevant today. It's just about I need data bound by a start and an end date. If we look at the preliminary things we need to get this going, of course there's some housekeeping you need to do. I put it in the app on start just because that's what this app is dedicated to, and I want to show you some of the things I did in order to sort of set this up as the app loads, of course. Most of this is just, you'll understand. So the first two is we have an event day with and a number of days to show. Because we are doing, let's bring up the actual, because everything here is based on these fixed columns, we made a variable for how wide that is. So these chunks are just standardized. It does help for being flexible, but of course, hey, we're good developers. We use variables. Next is the number of days to show. You could code that to 7 if you want to. You can code it to 5. This all depends on the calendar you're showing. I put it to 7. We need a default for the first day we're going to show. So when it loads, it's going to show today forward. Again, these are things that you will vary as you build this. But for today, that's what we've established. And like anything, we're going to be building stuff out of collections. So we're going to start with the collection of the dates that we care about. And that's what we have here, the current week. We do a quick for all, and all we want to do is get the next, in this case, 7 days. When I refer to 7, that's our for the week. So we're going to do a sequence of 7 events, starting at 0, skip by 1. We're going to do our as to label that as future date. And then from there, we're just going to build a collection. And it's going to store one thing. It's a date. And as we loop, we're just simply adding days. So we're taking today, we're adding a number of days from 0 to, it'll be 6 in this case. And we're just going to make a collection of days. And that's going to fuel our calendar. And if we see here across the top, sure, I've changed it. But here's the collection that will that will be displayed here on top of our calendar. And then from there, we have the events list collection. You see here multi-day events. Again, multi-day events. You see where it came from. And I went ahead and sorted it by start date because I want them to stack in sequential order. Now, I did note that this could be more efficient. I'm not really too picky here because I got 5 dates in my event list. You may want to, if once you get a lot of events, you're not going to want to load them all, because why would you, especially past events? But you're going to need a working set. So I just wanted to make note that this is not the most efficient way to do this. I just needed data for this example, so we're just going to load them all. Okay. So let's get started on building, shall we? So the first thing we're going to need to build. Now the secret here, if you look at the finished version, this is done with 2 galleries. We are going to stack up 2 galleries for this display. Like I said, this app is more about presentation than anything else. And one gallery is the grid, the blue in this case, with the dates, the day of the weeks, and these nice lines. The second gallery is the stacked events. And so that's how we get this effect. What we're going to do first is build the background gridded calendar. Okay? So we're going to go here, and we are going to add, this one is a horizontal gallery because we want our days to go to the width. So we'll go layout, we'll go blank horizontal. Get this up and running. and a little bit of housekeeping. So of course we want a border. Thought Power Apps was crashing on me. So we got a border. Now our data source is going to be a collection of the current week. And our width, now, yeah, it had a default. We're going to do var number of days to show times var event day width. So the calendar is going to be number of days times that width. Now if we look right above me, we're going to turn off the scroll bar because we're going to come close to the edge, and I don't need scrolling here. We do need the template padding to 0, and our template size, which is the individual item width, our template size is not the default. It is going to be var event day width. Okay, so underneath all of this we have 7 days, equal width of our gallery, fueled by our current week collection. Excuse me. We will need a text label, and very conveniently they threw the dates on there, and that's what we wanted. Now I will say you want to go ahead and format this for short date, because I'm going to do that real quick. If you use the calendar picker to pick a date, it's going to append the time to it. So it's just go ahead and do this right now and get it out of the way that it's only the date, because that's all I care about. We're going to center that because we like aesthetics. All right, next we're also going to put a label here. Same thing. And what I wanted here was the day of the week. Why did I want that? It's because the other one had that as well. Oops. Get you centered. Okay. You don't need this. I'm just doing it for the sake of it being there. And I am going to steal what I wrote in the other one. So we see we have Monday. There is no way to translate that because that would be too easy. And so what I just did a simple switch statement to convert the week date to a certain date. I suppose I could have put this in the collection. I just didn't. So we're going to take that switch command, which is simply translating the weekday date, which is just the numeric day of the week, and translating it into the full day. So we're going to take that, go back, and paste. Paste. And we have our days. Okay. The next thing we need is the grid lines. And that's going to be done. Notice now, previously I set the template padding to 0 because I want what I'm filling in each of the gallery cells to be a max width inside the grid. So we're going to do gridding using a rectangle. So we're going to drop a rectangle here. It's going to go right up to the bottom of Monday and to the bottom. And on our width, we're going to do var event day width. Our border thickness will be 1, and our fill will be transparent. And boom, we have grid lines. So I need to, there, now it's flush to the bottom. It's nothing special, but for some reason this is what amused me the most, is doing the grid, but it works. By just taking advantage of the border of the rectangle, we have a nice neat little grid that we get to use. So right now, again, we have our calendar grid. It is fairly flexible in that it is based off of our collection, and from our previous done screen. You see we're going to set that obviously here shortly by using these icons in that calendar picker. But until then, we're going to move on and try and get this day stack built. So let's go ahead and get that going. And as we see here, this is another gallery. So we're layering again our galleries on top of each other to give the effect that we need, because we have one horizontal gallery and we're going to have one vertical gallery. Obviously this can't be done in a single gallery to get the visual effect that I wanted here. And I guess that's more than anything, this is the trick. So in case you wanted to know, there you go, and you can stop watching. So if that's the case, I'll see you next time. But let's go ahead and get this gallery in place. So again, we are going to do now a vertical gallery. Whoa, wrong. We're going to do a blank vertical gallery. There we go. And we're going to get events. Now we're going to make this work, you want it up against, there we go. You want it to snap in to the width and the bottom of the rectangle part of your other gallery. Scroll bars in this case, I'm going to turn them off for effect. If you need them, of course, you're going to have to do something like that. But for right now, I just want to show you how I'm building the stack. If you want to work with the scroll bars, that part's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and turn those off. So we have our gallery, and in this case, we only need one label. So I'm going to go here, and again, I'm going to turn the template padding off because I want things flush up on each other. And you see here I got a label. Now I really don't care what the width is. I care about the height because we're going to be setting the width. So what I'm going to do, I like 40 for some reason. That's been good to me. So I want my height to be 40. Again, the width is going to vary. On the item itself, you could choose the padding you like. It doesn't really matter. That's going to be really more on the aesthetic for you. Now we're going to need this with a fill color, and I'm doing a color theme, previous video if you want. And which one did I use? Did I use icon color? I did. Okay, we're going to do a nice red. Now the template height, see, obviously we want to go ahead and do something more akin to that. You want it just a little bit bigger. And what I do here, my template size, I do 2 pixels more than the height of my item. And that is because you see this little white gap in between. You can have these as close together as you want. I left the gap because I went through all the trouble of seeing the grid lines. I wanted them to peek through. So I left a little bit of a gap so you can see a little blue dot and have an idea of where the days go. Adjust as necessary. Now in this particular label, we need text. And instead of the default, we're going to do event title. And for the sake of testing, I'm going to add in, oops, this item, event start date and end date, just to make sure we can see that I have them on the right dates. That's obviously not, well, I guess it could stay. Again, this would really depend more on your, just want something we can see here. This would depend on what you're showing in your event. I just want this so we can see what it is we have. So again, we see we have 6 dates. Now our items go straight to call events, and we're going to need to do a little bit of filtering here because we don't need all of the events. We need the ones that are to be shown in this week. Okay, so the events that we have right now is just the events collection, and that has way too many things. So there are three groups of events, three categories of events that we want to get. If we look at our calendar, we know so our day span right now is the 14th through the 20th. The events that we want to see are anything that would appear in this week. And so the three groups are essentially, does it start and end in this span? That's the easy one. But we also have to deal with things that started before this week but end in this week or after, and events that started this week and end after. So it's the ones that are going to fit in this case, that are going to overlap somehow in this calendar. And so we're going to need to do a bit of filtering. Now, I went ahead and copied it from the other screen because you don't need to see me type, but let's go over what we have. We have, again, we're filtering our events where the start date is greater than or equal to the first day of our collection. So that's, just so we know, first date, last date. And so we see here, for the events that start in that week, for the events that end in that week, and for the events that span that week, we have them here. And that will give us these four. Again, this is really, why that efficiency problem would come up earlier in this collection, because you're using a subset. You need to decide how you want to pull from your list to make the calendar work better. I mean, obviously you want to keep things, the worst case scenario is a year-long event, because now you're going to have something that is, that's going to get all of these events. Now, whether you decide to populate your collection using this logic, or get it every so many clicks on the next and the previous, is entirely up to you. But this is why, because we're going to use that subset, but it's a weird subset, because all we care about is, does it hit this sweet spot of the time in the year? So something to think about. But again, let's work on the presentation. So we have our dates, and they are stacked. I did the sort order on the collection by start date. So we see here, that's our order. The order is really irrelevant. I just, a bit of OCD on the stacking, so I wanted the new things on top, and so I put them there. Now we need to worry about positioning these items. And the two things that we're going to have to care about are the X position, X space position, and the width. And that's going to kind of move it in and around our calendar. So let's start with the X position. So we're going to click our label, and we're going to go down here to X. And of course they all start at 0. We don't want that. So I went and copied from the other one, because I'm not going to make you watch me type. And we're just going to talk about what we did here. So the X position, we need to make sure that if it starts in our current week, that we move it over however many days it needs to move over. But if it starts before our current week, of course, we're just going to flush it pure left, because obviously the start date is way earlier. So we're going to do a bit of an if statement. And the first thing we see here is, we're going to subtract the first day of our collection of days for the calendar and the start date. And if it's 0, meaning it's the same day, or less, meaning it's in the past, we're just going to go ahead and set our X position at 0. So anything today or anything in the past, we don't care, because all that means is it's going to appear on that day 1. However, for the, let's see, here's our 0. But for the days that start in our current week, we need to go ahead and move it over. So we start with our base, and it's going to be an increment of var event day widths. So that equals 1 day width, and of course we need to move them out. So we see here that same date diff that we had done, where we are subtracting the first day of our collection and the start date of our event in days. That's the number of days we want to skip. So now that we've put that in here and we reduce, we see now that our days have all staggered out. And I named them very specifically so I could easily see. Now, of course, I did the first one of these a few days ago, so we see how end after doesn't really work. But if we look here, we now see the 11th is our start date, obviously before the 14th, so we are flush left. The 15th in the middle, we see that these two start in the 15th and move forward, and our single day event starts and ends on the 16th. So the widths we see here are what I drug out. We haven't changed those yet, obviously, and so we see only that we have the staggered start event. Now we need to worry about how long they go. When I first started thinking about this, I was like, oh, it's easy, number of days. But if they go way past this, that width can go up to infinity. So I want to be efficient about it and only draw maxing out at this particular end here. Yes, we could do the overflow is hidden if we wanted to and just have number of days and let it go out. But again, if you have a year-long event or multi-year event for whatever events you're showing, I just have a problem with a several thousand pixel wide rectangle. So we're going to do this the right way. Plus we have to, because for the ones that end here, it's all the same formula. So if we go to the width property, we see here the 491, which is just what I drug out. Do the magic of editing, we are going to paste in the formula. And let's go through what it is we're looking at. With the width, essentially we're trimming the back end of the rectangle with the number of days we need to pull off. So we have our handy dandy var event day width. These are, of course, we're going to remove chunks of days. So how many days is what we're figuring out. And we're going to start with event day width, and we're going to start with 7, and we're just, because that's our, well, okay, caught me here. This should be var number of days. Okay, so we're going to start with our max number of days as just a full week, and we need to see how many we need to skip. So we start with a full, and the first thing we need to see, first off, what's our offset? Because if we're going to pull 3 days off, we want to make sure we have the front accounted for. So we are going to do a similar if statement as we did earlier. So if the date diff is less than or equal to 0, well, we're flush against the left side of our calendar, so we don't need to remove anything or account for any days missing from the leading. And if we do have days where it is moved forward, this is the same if we did for the exposition. Suppose I could have used the exposition right here. And then we're also going to subtract the end days. So we see here if our date diff, we reversed it, so we have the end date minus the last day of our week, so the far right side, that if that's negative, we're going to take away 0, because that has expanded out past the calendar. However, if it's within the calendar border, we're going to use that number of days. So we have event day width minus some number of days we need to contract our event, and at the end a single -1 pixel, because I want to see that last edge of the border. And now we have, as we've seen here, everything adjusts. That -1, by the way, gets you, let's go ahead and expand that out. This little blue line hiding right there is why I did the -1, because I want to see the calendar grid border show that that's when it ends. But we now see here our start before, 11, obviously way early. 16 is here, and my dates go through that day, not ending on that day. So anything with the 16th as the end date includes that day. So we see here at the end of 16 we end, at the end of 18 we end, and then this little single day event that's kind of working here is just on the 16th, and then that shows here. If you don't include the day, single day events sort of fail, and you have to do math on the start date. Again, adjust as you need to for your particulars, but in my in my case, I have through that end date. But that's our calendar. I mean, this is the crux of it right here. Adjusting the X position and the width gives us this stackable grid. So that's all you need. Then, we're good to go here. Now, this isn't very interactive, so we need to do something about that. And that's where I came in, and we're going to go ahead and add a way to move things around. So we see we have a back arrow. Now the whole thing is predicated on a collection and a start date. And that's all we really need to adjust with these icons. And since both collections are based on that start date, they will both adjust as they need to. So if we look at our onSelect, of course we're defaulting to false. And the logic needed here is really just a reset. So we're going to set, we want to go back a week in this case. And again, I have my hard-coded values. You want to use your variable. We're going to set the first event date to display, which was defaulted in app on start to today, but now we want to adjust that. We want to do -7 days, and then we're going to just simply clear our collection and reset it. Okay? If we hit play, we click back, everything moved. We did -7 and everything else adjusted because we are based off of those collections and those default dates. If we take this and we simply make a copy and a paste and adjust our icon, Microsoft, if you happen to be watching, can you please default to where we are so I can get the next one much easier? And in this case, we want to go forward. So just simply take away the negative. Boom, we're right back where we were. Easy peasy. That gives our navigation, and if we want to be really convenient to our people, oh, there we are. We put in a date picker. And our default date is var. So we have our first, and what we have to change is, what happens when we choose a new date. What we want to do is look at our onSelect function, and it's the same logic as in our previous and our next buttons in terms of clearing our collection and recollecting. But what we've done now is we've taken our first event display date and we've chosen, in this case, date picker 1.selected date. So instead of just doing a date add ±7, we're just taking a date straight out. So if we were to come in here and say, June 16, okay. We see here we start on the 16th, move it to the 17th, we moved over. And now you have an interactive calendar where you can choose what date you want to start on. You can move forward or backwards a week. From here you can tinker to whatever level you want to. You want 1 day forward, 1 day backwards. You want to turn it off so you can't go in the past. Whatever you need to do, that's up to you and your logic. But this is what we have to interact with the calendar, move it forward, move it backwards. And again, this is where the efficiency of the collection comes into play. Like, at what point do you need to reload and look in the past? That's like pointing that out, because eventually you're gonna see a performance hit if you have to reload every event every time. So, but that's our calendar, our event calendar. I hope it's useful. Like I say, I just found the logic of stacking these galleries as the interesting part here, and I wanted to share it with you guys. I hope you found it useful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.